You're not anybody in America unless you're on TV. On TV is where we learn about who we really are. Because what's the point of doing anything worthwhile if nobody's watching? And if people are watching, it makes you a better person.
Woo, welcome. You have now entered Mad Warfare, mutually assured distraction, where we explore the weird, terrifying, and sometimes hilarious ways war is fought today, and how we can all protect our minds before we go too mad to find them.
Oh my!
Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern.
Okay, you talk if you haven't got a brain.
Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern.
Reminder, the opinions on this show are ours alone, and honestly, we might regret some of them later. They don't reflect our employers, past, present, or imaginary. This is a playground of wild ideas, so please, don't take anything here too seriously, unless it's genius. Then it was definitely intentional. Dear audience, what if the same tactics used to make you care about a superstar can be used to sway an election? What if your opinions on culture, on policy, on politics aren't really as self-made as you think? Today, we're pulling apart the fame machine, how it works, how it spreads, and how it's being used to manipulate minds and shape behavior, like military psyops with better lighting. Because when attention is currency, fame isn't just influence, it's a weapon, kids. That's what we're digging into in today's episode of Mad Warfare. I'm co-host Jocelyn Brady.
I'm co-host Sean Anthony Guillory.
And I'm producer Amin El-Filali.
And our guest today has seen the world from both sides. He started his career in music, working at MySpace and Sony Music, and building viral campaigns for major artists like Travis Scott, before moving into defense and intelligence, where he now advises senior leaders on information warfare. Please welcome Shane Morris.
Boop.
Oh wow! I'll have like some cool royalty-free intro music.
Hell yeah!
Make it like a clown intro, like a interesting Benny Hill kind of thing. That'd be good.
So Shane, this is my first time meeting you with a face together.
You didn't have a face before? It's like the movie Face Off with Nick Cage and John Travolta.
That's right.
Please don't take off my face and use it to bang my wife. I'd really appreciate that.
That's our origin story. How did you know?
How would you, like, broad strokes, explain your career to somebody who's meeting you for the first time?
Yeah, I didn't mean to get into music. I got into music because I was proficient at programming, and it then just sort of progressed. I think most people are intentional about a music career. I was totally unintentional about it. Just like you start pulling the thread, and then one day you realize that your resume is just one thing and you can't get out of that industry. And then randomly, my proclivity for being good at music and self-promotion helped me gain some TikTok notoriety. And by the time I got some TikTok notoriety, randomly this guy who worked in defense and national security at a large contracting firm contacted me and said, "Hey, your GitHub is actually really cool. You actually might be a good engineer." And so it was mid-pandemic, and the music industry was pretty much shut down, and it was great timing. So I just sort of sidestepped my way into it, and I snuck by there for almost 3 years without really anybody noticing I was there. I kind of feel like if you ever like snuck into a club, you're not supposed to be there, and you just kind of like know the bouncer. You're like, anybody gonna notice that I'm here? It's like going to the lesbian bar, right? Like, well, I've got like a lesbian build, so a lot of times I can get away with it, and they notice I'm there, and so then they finally realize that I'm not allowed at Lipstick Lounge or whatever it's called, and I gotta leave. But I was really killing it with the Melissa Etheridge cover for a while, so people didn't notice.
Come to my window.
Exactly.
I have so many questions, but I'd love to know, this is obviously all post MySpace. What were you doing at MySpace? What was that like?
So I started actually when it was e-Universe, before the MySpace thing kind of came together. and I knew a guy who knew a guy,
That knew Tom?
and I was proficient at Visual Basic, which was used for programming phone games in the early 2000s.
Wow.
And so initially, I was going to be hired to make games that were predatory for teenagers against their parents' phone bills. And then they were like, "Hey, there's this like purchase we've made, this acquisition, MySpace. We need help on the engineering side there, so we're going to move you to this team." And at that time, there was only 12 people on the MySpace team. Period. That was it. It was very, very small. And then within the first 3 months, we had accidentally acquired like 1 million users. So it really took off, and it just randomly progressed. It wasn't like I meant to do this. I don't think anybody who meant to make MySpace happen understood when it was happening, how it was happening. It was Friendster losing popularity and crashing constantly. And then there was another site called Zynga. And then there was what was that journaling site that people use? It was all the weird emo kids would write their sad, journal stories there. Yeah, there just needed to be one place. And Facebook was just for the Ivies at that point. Only the Ivy League kids getting into Facebook. And so, MySpace just sort of happened strangely. And then I was there.
Wow.
Actually,
And I want to also point out, Amin here, a producer Amin, is also a musician. And so part of the reason he's here is to learn how to get famous like the rest of us. But just a fascination with music and the music industry and knowledge of it as well. So,
Well, yeah, I wish I had more useful knowledge for you. But I just this guy and then I got famous.
I
I'm
knew
kidding.
the trick.
I'm kidding.
I knew it.
I'm kidding.
all right. So
John's going to be like, how much of this we're going to edit out?
one thing I do know about your background is, again, you were roommates with Lil B.
Lil B and
So
Keith.
Keith as well.
Jenkins,
Yeah. So
28.
okay. Got it.
28.
So
Yeah.
Lil B, for the rest of us, for our audience who doesn't know.
Brandon McCartney.
yeah, that's all you
Lil
need
B,
to
the
know.
bass god, TYBG.
I don't know how else to describe Lil B, besides being extremely ahead of his time. And I think every rapper of probably the last 15 years probably have a lot to thank from him in terms of how to use things like social media, including MySpace, to get really, really famous while being truly an independent artist. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah. So Lil B was interesting because I met him because of Keith, and he had 500 plus MySpace accounts. This is at a time when you could only have one, or the idea
He's
was
a
the
rule
musician would
breaker.
only have one, but we had a limit of 5 songs, and Lil B was committed to not making good music, but just making a lot of it. And so no matter how bad the songs were, he was putting out 5 a day, sometimes more.
Wow.
Why not? Why not make just every song but worse? And so every probably 300 or 400, so like 1 out of 300 or 400 was listenable. And so he kind of got famous just on volume. If you make enough, eventually one of them won't be terrible. And he's a testament to eventually you're bad enough for a long enough time that people might accept that you're average.
Yeah.
And in the music business, sometimes that's good enough.
But, I mean, it ends up being, again, I think that lesson is something that's kind of, we see both in the
Today.
entertainment industry, again, like, in politics as well, where a lot of the times there's just so much of that focus of, I just want to put out good stuff and I'd rather have no attention than negative attention, versus it really is about how much attention you get out there, even if some of it is bad. And I do think.
Oh yeah, no, he had no shame
Not at all.
whatsoever. He showed up on ESPN wearing a dress. He was selling pictures of his feet. He didn't care about anything.
So he's on OnlyFans today.
Before there was
Is
only.
he? I'm sure he is. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Was that his goal? Like, just be famous?
Yep.
Is there?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's kind of you have to understand the relative world because he's from Berkeley, right? So he grew up around like a bunch of Silicon Valley money. And so him, and I'm not going to quote him directly, but his goal was just to be able to drive an E-Class and have Jamba Juice every day. To him, that was making it. So he made it. He drives I believe he drives an S class now, but he just, he just wants to show up at Jamba Juice and flip flops. That's his life goal. And so he's maintained exactly what he wanted to achieve.
It's kind of the Taylor Swift strategy. I mean, no dissing on Taylor Swift, but just the volume of music and there's a whole story of her kind of taking back her I'm going to butcher this, but taking back her rights kind of, right? And then she's re-released things, and then the massive, the volume again of her releasing is kind of record breaking.
A weapon even to other competing artists.
She does create a lot of volume. I will say that. Actually, this is something my wife and I were talking about on our way home from the hospital with our newborn recently, where we were trying to decide what she wanted to listen to. She just pushed a child into the world. So I was like, all right, you get to pick the music in my car, although normally she would not. So I made an exception. What a gracious host I have in my own vehicle. So I said, what would you like to listen to? And she said, oh, Taylor Swift. And I said, which album? And then I realized she's put out like 20, like she's prolific, not like Lil B, but, approaching that, which is weird to say in a sentence.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. What insights did you learn? I mean, I'm kind of thinking about two questions in my head. One is, are fame and integrity the pursuit of fame and integrity mutually exclusive? Can they coexist? And what did you learn?
You can do that. I mean, it's rare to be able to like have some integrity and quote unquote do it the right way. I'll say this. I'll say my brother-in-law to, not to keep it in the family, but he's in a country band called Turnpike Troubadours, and they're a nationally touring band now. They do really well for themselves. But I think the thing people forget is they've been around for 17 years, and none of them came from money. They were just very like repetitive, hard work, Oklahoma red dirt, playing in every single bar you could for as long as possible, every gig for as long as it took. Yeah. And if you do that for a long enough time and enough dive bars, enough drunk people will remember the name of your band. Yeah. And eventually you sell enough merch to be able to build a small audience. And so that's one of the big, struggles is a lot of people are super talented, but they just don't have the repetition they need. Yeah. And this is, this was really true when I was living in Nashville. I would meet tons of talented people, and I was like, it's gonna be well. In fact, I'm gonna name drop. It's tacky. So I was on the phone with G-Eazy earlier. So he's this like white rapper from the Bay Area, and we were talking about some things that had happened in the past at the Claremont Lounge in Atlanta. And for those of you who don't know, the Claremont Lounge is a strip club featuring mostly women over the age of 60. And so we had gone there one night, not because you like the dancers, but because it's just a spectacle. And this was back in 2009. And he had just played a music festival in Atlanta called A3C, which is this hip hop thing. And so, he and I are planning a return trip to Atlanta to go to the Claremont. And I was like, it's crazy. Like, you are famous now, but in 2009, no one knew who you were. About 12 people showed up to the stage he was performing on, and most of them weren't even paying attention because he was opening for Dead Prez that night. And so he was like the fourth artist before Dead Prez. It was G-Eazy, and then there was an artist named Murs out of LA, who was like this backpack rapper. And and then it was, hold on, was it Murs? And then, it was Murs and Dead Prez. That's right. Yeah. So it was an interesting lineup, to say the least.
Did you, so MySpace, right? You get out of MySpace. I don't know how you got out of MySpace, but what happens after MySpace?
Oh, they fired all of us. We got bought. Yeah. So it was one of those like classic corporate meetings. And, the day the buyout happens, you're like, great news. News Corp, the owners of Fox News, they're coming in to help us run this social media company. and everyone in that meeting, because, they call us into like this little auditorium for the employee area, and everyone walks out of that meeting, and I'm young at the time. I was 20. And so I believed them because I was a fool. And I remember this guy named David, who's one of my coworkers, was like, dude, we're all getting fired. I'm like, no, man, you heard him. They said that they loved us. And he was like, okay, I would be more worried if they said I would think I'm keeping my job if they came in and said, we're going to make some changes and told the truth. He's like, because they came in and said, we love what you do. We knew, he's like, 90% of us are going to be gone. And I think he was about right. Like, I think they cut about 75% of the staff. And so at that point, I knew that I wanted to get into management because I'd met a lot of artists when I was there. and I had all the connections in LA and Beverly Hills. And from there, that's when I got into talent management. And so I had just people that I knew, and I had the necessary people skills. And, being a manager, especially in that era, was you need to be a good digital property manager. You have to be good at data analytics. This is the very beginning of building online platforms. There was no Shopify. There was no way to build an e-commerce store easily. So being that I could be sort of a one-man show and build all my e-commerce stores and build my own analytics platforms, then also do the necessary work of, keep the bag of Coke away from the artist, like you have to be able to do
Yes,
the finer work of music
yeah.
to make sure people are productive.
Yeah.
And so if you can do enough of those things enough times, you'll be successful. And, thankfully I was good at playing keep away and good at development. So it suited me well.
Data analytics, babysitting, and persistence.
Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Yeah. As long as you can do those three things. Oh, and also the people you're working with need to be objectively attractive. Like you can do a lot of things, but being pretty is like big. So sorry, that's not going to work out.
I had a feeling. I was waiting.
Sorry,
Yeah,
man.
I was waiting for the time.
Not going to make it.
Nope.
It's the ugliest woman I've ever seen. That's a fierce beard, though. It's a very trustworthy beard.
This is like the opposite. This is the prelude to what's that movie? The Blue Steel.
Oh,
yeah.
Zoolander?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like upside down world Zoolander.
He's doing the face.
All of
For
us.
those of you
All of
just
us are
listening, it's just a
gremlins.
face back and forth, and he's doing Blue Steel.
That's right.
Yeah.
Trying to show us his beard and jawline.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh wait, so getting into artist management out of what's that? I'm just imagining like a Jerry Maguire moment or something, but it's just like, what do you do? Do you just you call an artist and
Who's
say,
coming
hey,
with
I want to
me?
manage you?
Who's coming with me?
I had people asking me. So that was the interesting note is before I even got into it, artist management is a game where it's frequently populated by attorneys because there's a lot of contract work. And so I had met a lot of artists who hated their management. And I think because I was a peer and they knew that I was actually doing things that were real to them, at least. And I signed an NDA, so I can't say who it was, but I had built this huge online platform for a record label that was popular at the time. It was a smaller indie label. And, the year that they'd started, they were selling about $50,000 in vinyl and t-shirts and stuff through their store. And they had, a dozen artists. And so they consider that to be a success because if you've only been selling merch through record stores and Hot Topic, then anything online is a win. And the manager's nephew, I think, had initially built this very terrible website to sell things through. And so I realized, and it was all the artists, right, on one site. It was just the label site. And so I was like, well, why don't we just have each artist have their own site and sell their own stuff and we'll just unify it later. And, there's multiple, fulfillment companies in LA that do band merch. And I was like, we don't even need to do this on our own. We'll just send the orders through when they're done. And this is before UPS or USPS had an API. So there was a lot of manual work to it and they just hate. Anyway, I went and re-architected it all. It took me about 2 months. And I ended up making individual stores for each band and then they could promote it on their tours and worked out really well. So they went from doing $50,000 a year to, I think we did 16 million the first year in sales. These are all popular, well-known bands. People were, they were used to buying things online, but they would buy things on eBay, right? People trusted at this time. This isn't like the dark ages. It was 2007, so, the music industry is just very, I want to say they're reluctant, to have new ideas and they don't like change.
Really?
But anytime you say, I want to do something new or different, their knee jerk reaction is to be
Wait.
terrified. And so I was kind of, an outlier.
How
in
would
that
you
sense.
compare it to? You've been in the government space long enough now in terms of what I thought was reluctance. And again, I feel like anything that we see either in government information operations or political strategy, that stuff actually comes from the entertainment industry first. So you saying that music industry, I don't know, unless you're talking about bigger labels being kind of reluctant, I thought they'd be some of the ones that maybe would be encouraging that kind of push.
Oh no.
Wow.
Yeah, thank goodness. No, thank God I'm beyond my NDA with Sony Music Nashville now, and I never intend to go back. So I'll throw them all the way under the bus. Yeah, no, they were terrible about change. They had no idea where the digital platforms would be. And I remember, the day that Apple Music was announced, the streaming platform, we had our CEO then, Gary Overton, announce to the entire group that don't worry, streaming music is just a fad. People still want to buy music. And this was our CEO, and that guy was as backwards as they come. And he was our leader, you know? And so I remember listening to him and thinking, I work for this idiot. And knowing, like, I can't say anything, I'm not going to fight it, but that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. There were many ends at Sony, but that was definitely one of many ends where I realized that I was never going to want to work in, at least at the major label again. And I think the big issue is nobody talented that has any amount of talent stays in the record label side, because you don't get paid much. You know, the margins are super thin. You're not really moving that much merch. You're not really moving that many, you know, vinyl records. Amazon's still outselling you because it's easier to buy things on Amazon. So, you know, the record labels were dinosaurs. And this was even in, you know, 2016 when I left. They were still talking about terrestrial radio and XM Sirius strategy. They're like, how do we get more absorption and you know, mainstream radio? And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, you do realize that Spotify is not going away, right? This is not just like a thing that you're going to beat. But no, they were stupid about it. And to this day, that's why I think indie music finally gained a foothold, for lack of a better term. It's because the record labels just didn't understand that they were wrong on every count.
Why do you think that is? Like, what's the clinging to dinosaur behavior come from?
Because investment in anything new requires money. And if you got to spend money, then it's always going to be unpopular in the office to quote unquote absorb that risk. But you know, the dinosaurs, right? Like Lil G, Garth Brooks, Dolly Parton, they've already made all their money. Dolly Parton's in theme parks. Garth Brooks is, you know, owning bars and restaurants. And so they don't really look at music as a platform anymore. Music is what they use as like their brand, but the things that make them money are water slides, right? Like if you make money in music, get it out of music. Like that's like the first step. Like that's why so many artists, like they don't reinvest in music. Kenny Chesney has Blue Chair Bay Rum. G-Eazy launched, what is that? Sorry, he's my friend, and I don't even know the name of his whiskey company. Anyway, he's got some whiskey company he runs, right?
I say I don't mind those free publicity.
Yeah, I would plug it, but I'm such a terrible friend. I don't even know the name of his
company. Right?
Right?
He loves you.
It's so good you forgot.
Yeah, that's it. It was so good. I blacked out. Wait, is that responsible drinking? No, I don't know.
Right. So you're saying the writings on the wall, like from payola back then, what is the 2.0 of that right now for people who don't know how the industry right now works? They just see, oh, Spotify is the biggest. That's all they know. Specifically on the levers that you can pull with money and with other ways than just hard work and blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. So on the label side, it's clear. So because Spotify is co-owned and co-managed by the three major labels, Spotify editorial playlists, like they have access and independent artists don't. I mean, it's that simple. And so those editorial playlists are the ones that get featured on the Spotify homepage, and they're featured before the algorithmic playlist. And when I was working at Sony, we had access to Spotify reps that you as an independent artist would never have access to, because you don't even know the editors are, you don't know the A&Rs at Spotify, their curation teams, or, you know, remember the type of people who want to take a job at Spotify fresh out of college so they can say, I work at Spotify and an A&R, it's cool. And they think they're going to go work for a record label one day and that's going to be their end. It's sort of like in the government business where you've got people who like, you know, worked in government for a long time and they pretend that they're going to take off for a year before they go work and make triple the money as a private contractor. Like we all pretend that it doesn't happen, you know, like, oh, why is this guy from Spotify working at Sony now? Oh, I don't know. You know, like, you know, one hand washes the other. So we like to pretend that people don't cross over and do each other favors, but it's absolutely happening behind the scenes. It's just that it's not that clear radio payola path. So of course, you know, there's plausible deniability and like you just move along and you just accept it.
Speaking of terrible people, can you tell us some Travis Scott stories?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's like, I think I'll say this. I always knew that Travis Scott was a terrible person, like from day one, but I think that because I knew he was talented, I was willing to just kind of put up with a lot of it. because I was looking at the dollar signs at the end. I was like, well, this guy's so talented. You know, I also think when you're working with rappers, you're working within, you know, the Overton window of rappers. You know, I would not expect these things from the pop starlet of the world, right? But, you know, with rappers, I will say like the over under, it's like when you're setting like lines, like the over under, is he going to shoot 1 or 1.5 people over or under, right? Like what's my, like, am I okay with the under here if he only shoots one person, you know, and technically would it help his credibility a little bit? Yeah. You know, he was a kid from the suburbs. He didn't have any real street cred. So he kind of needed to shoot at least one person, right? You know, otherwise people won't believe you're a real rapper. You know, like that's the whole thing, right? What 50 Cent said, you know, he got shot 3 times. And I said, oh, he's not really a gangster. He didn't shoot back. Right. And so with Travis Scott, you know, he needed, I hate to say this, I was more thug than he was. Right. Like people were more scared of me than they were of him. Because like I'm a grown man with a grill and a mullet, and I chose to be this way. I could look like a taxpayer. I went out of my way to look like this, right?
I'm curious about Travis Scott. If I remember right, I think you were talking about this in one of your videos, kind of that like the manufacturing of his popularity.
Right.
How did that work?
So very early on, most record labels were not savvy to how networks of bots would operate.
Gotcha.
And so we did a couple different things. At the time, there was a guy named Tony Loney, who was the little brother of this guy named James Loney, who played for the Dodgers. So Tony was our photographer. And so we walked into the Los Angeles Dodgers social media marketing office with James, and he got Travis Scott verified on Twitter when really only, you know, really famous people got verified. Mm-hmm. So we got him verified that way. And in LA, there's always somebody who can pull some string to make you look, you know, get you the blue check. And back in the day that mattered. Mm-hmm. And then I hired a bunch of Mechanical Turks on AWS to set up a gazillion different Gmail accounts. And then we mass followed him, but we didn't do it all at once. I was adding like 300 to 500 a week. So it looked more organic. Because when I would go to a record label, if you just have, you know, 10,000 followers, well, that doesn't work. What I need to show is growth. Well, how do I show growth? I add growth in a way that I make the chart go up and to the right. And how do we show the play counts are growing? Well, I just bought the Spotify followers, and then all of a sudden the Spotify accounts are all commenting with canned comments. But the cool thing is, because his audience was young, I could just have like canned emojis. And so we would just enter emojis as comments and cycle through them. And it looked legitimate. And this is like before anybody even knew how to build bot networks, right? This is before containerization was normal. And so I could just run a bunch of VMs, and we had the VMs actually running out of a server in the basement of the studio in LA. Yeah. So I would just spin them up when I needed them and turn them off when I didn't need them. And it was really cheap. I think all in, the computer that we used initially was a used computer. So it was like this $250 former office machine, you know, like we were doing it super on the cheap, and people thought he was so popular. I remember, there was this guy, he was a rapper from Atlanta named Donis. He was one of the co-founders of Fool's Gold Records with A-Track and the guys. And so I remember, at the time, we had just booked A-Track and Yesayer and this guy named Baz, Will Wiesenfeld. Really cool guy, by the way. Shout out to Baz. I always loved him to death. Anyway, so we had just booked him up the show in Eugene, Oregon. And we came back down and A-Track met us, and he was like, oh, I keep hearing about this Travis Scott guy. He's blowing up. And it's like, yeah, yes. Cause like I would tell all my blog friends like, hey, go promote Travis's new song, you know, whatever, you know, like, and they would, because I was one of the Earmill co-founders. They'd do me the favor. And so he's all over every blog. His numbers are blowing up. It looks like he's getting 500,000 plays on every SoundCloud song, but really he was getting like 10,000 plays, right? Wow. It was all make-believe. But then when we went to the record labels, they were so impressed, they would send more people down to the studio. And so I remember when T.I. and his security guy, D, came down to LA, you know, they came down to the dungeon with us, and it's just me and Travis and T.I. and D. And I'd known D for years because one of those weird small world things, D is also the head of security for the Claremont Atlanta. So he's T.I.'s personal security.
Wraps up.
You know, so I had known D for a long time. I was like, oh yeah, bring Tip through. And so Travis is a nobody, but we made the entire world believe through bots that this guy was just the next big thing, and he was blowing up and super viral because we had the blog side covered. And as long as we could make it look like the numbers were all working, we could go to any record label, we'd be like, eh. And in July we had this many followers, but today we're here. And it's just like, how many more Mechanical Turks do I want to buy? All right, it's $10 to get me another 1,000 followers. Let's go. You know, like,
so here's my question in this.
Yeah.
When do you think was the moment where like the escape velocity from your botnet kind of went like, oh, this is now real fame. He is now legitimately famous. You faked it until you finally make it. I was wondering, like, what do you think that moment was?
So it was when Anthony Kilhofer reached out to us. So Anthony Kilhofer was Kanye's engineer. And I remember somebody had reached out. I forget who it was. One of my connects in Atlanta. Actually, I know who was it. It was Mike Wahlberg. And so Mike was the co-owner of Stankonia Studios in Atlanta, and I'd known him for a while. And so Mike was like, hey, by the way, this guy, Anthony Kilhofer, is an engineer. He was asking me if I knew you and if I had your contact information before I gave it to him. I wanted to make sure. I'm like, why are you calling me? Kanye's engineer is asking for my contact number. Just give him my fucking number. You know, Mike, what are you doing? Like, why are you wasting my time? Like, get him on the phone with me. And so then Travis went up to New York to go work with him really briefly. And that week, Kanye started tweeting about him. And he met Kanye in New York, and they like took a photo together, and they like tweeted it out, Kanye tweeted it out. And this is before like Kanye had become Hitler Light. And so like this was, you know, like at the time when it was okay to be a Kanye fan, right? And so at that point I was like, wait a minute, Kanye West is like taking pictures with and tweeting about this random kid from the Houston suburbs that we've made look really popular. And at that point with Kanye's megaphone, because the numbers were already there on Spotify, he looked popular, he was verified. It became okay socially for fans to adopt him because he was the underground guy that had been adopted by the industry, and he wasn't an industry plant. And the other thing was, like, critically, his music was really good. You know, we had him working with multi-platinum producers and engineers in LA because people just believed he was inevitable. So even though we couldn't afford to pay these guys their usual rates, they'd be like, no, I want to work with him. I know he's on the way up, you know? And so we, shout out to like, you know, Alex Greenwald from Phantom Planet, who had, you know, worked with him really early on. I mean, he was working with like real big pop songwriters, Nelson, Ryan, Will, R.I.P. You know, all the guys that really supported him early on. Kesha, strangely enough. Anyway, yeah, like he was working with so many people he had no business being in the same room with. And it was just because everyone believed he was inevitable because we convinced people that he was inevitable.
Wow. You created the ecosystem for the social proof until it got picked up by Kanye's social proof platform. And wow.
Is that still happening? And people,
It's
people
so
get away
much
with it?
harder now. And I think it's because the Spotify's really good at picking up bots. They look for, you know, people who are looking for play counts, but they don't even do it for the popularity. They do it because they don't want the payouts. You know, 30 seconds you getting paid. Right. So they don't want that. They don't want that. SoundCloud doesn't matter anymore unless you're like 14 and extremely online. So that's a non-factor. And Apple Music is much more tightly controlled. Like anything that even approaches something that looks like automatic plays, or you try and do anything on like Selenium or Beautiful Soup, or like try and write a playwright script for Apple Music, they'll give you one of those little puzzles to solve on the screen.
What about
Apple Music is a lot tighter.
What about TikTok?
TikTok, you can, okay, this is the inverse effect of TikTok. If you try and fake popularity on TikTok, their algorithmic engine is so tight that this is the way that I actually, I'll say this. Yeah, I'll say this. This is the way I get people I don't like shadow banned, is I will just buy them bots, and then TikTok will assume that they're trying to game the system.
Negative
and
SEO.
so, yeah, they'll be like, no, you're not faking us. No, you can't buy popularity here. And so they'll suppress your account if you try and buy like fake followers and fake comments.
Very
TikTok
good.
will shut you down.
Well, speaking of buying popularity, I just want to call attention to this beautiful mug, Mad Warfare, and I can put it into my tote behind me. Thank you.
Moved.
Shane, what similarities do you see in driving fame or capturing attention with these major artists to elections, politics, how how we're being influenced to believe or vote in certain ways.
Sure. This is really easy and linear. The people want to believe something. So with the reason people wanted Travis Scott to be popular is because people want to believe that the underdog can make it and go to the top. The building of a narrative is something that is consistent across the music business. It's consistent if you're even trying to be an independent artist and say visual art, right? You have to build this narrative that people want to believe and buy into. And so most of the misinformation campaigns out there are narrative building. It has to give people a storyline that makes sense. And most of these stories are things that you could reference in the real world. The David and Goliath story, the, people overcoming the odds, or the government's trying to keep the story secret. And so this is the real story. People want to believe there's conspiracies because of inherent distrust. And so if you give them something that feels like it could be true, they'll run with it. And the truth, as I've often seen, especially, working in government or working in music, is that it's usually really stale, and it's not a conspiracy. It's usually people who suck at their jobs, or, it's never the conspiracy. It's never malicious. It's usually just people failing upwards. And it's just, I think it's more unbelievable that people can fail upwards and be successful rather than there being like this cabal of, bankers in the middle of the earth controlling, pulling all the levers or something,
Space
not
lasers.
that I think that that's a job that I wouldn't want. I actually think it would be really sick to be a banker in the middle of the earth, for anybody who's listening in LinkedIn world and wants to pass that down. They need data scientists, right? Come on.
My goodness gracious.
Yeah.
We interrupt this episode to say, if you've ever felt really alone and didn't know where to turn, may we suggest, put the picture over here, Ellie Yonker. Elle is what national security should look like. She protects people online as a cybersecurity expert, but she also shows up for people in crisis through the Hive Social Garden, which helps folks find real support when things get hard. Her website, thehivesocial.garden. She's our first recurring sponsor. Thank you eternally for that, which feels exactly right. Elle, this is for you and for everybody listening. Please go to her website, thehivesocial.garden. Feel free to bother her on LinkedIn. She'll probably appreciate it. Now, back to the show.
So again, like when you got into like the government space and we, like the cognitive security, cognitive warfare, was there anything you felt like you had to learn like new, or was it just like, oh, same old, same old?
That's tough. So I think that, at a state level, I'd never dealt with state level actors who were trying to, maliciously influence like government things. But I had recognized like how to see when something didn't look real, like because I'd created enough bot networks and it was prevalent enough by say like 2015, 2016, especially when I was working at the label, because we would evaluate signing artists whether or not we thought their play counts were real. And so I could kind of suss out whether or not I thought there was a person behind the accounts. And so, not to like call out any, young little singers from Oklahoma or whatever, but sometimes they would take dad's money and they would hire some SEO gurus who would make them look popular on Instagram. So they would have enough followers and they come in our office. And then, our marketing team would send me a whole thing and be like, all right, Shane, can you audit this to make sure that these are real fans? And, we'd find that, young little starlet from Oklahoma who had, had dad's money and paid for the great studio time and all that, had also paid for popularity, because there's no conceivable way for her to gain 80,000 fans without playing real shows and actually building up a real profile. So some of the things don't make sense. And so for me, when I started looking at cognitive warfare, it was, these accounts don't make content. How can they have many followers? These accounts aren't doing anything that would engage in a way that makes sense. And so, yeah, there's that initial sniff test, and then you can actually go and, build a little AWS app really quickly if you want to determine whether or not, they're always online 24 hours a day, if they comment in more than one language, if it's, the kind of behavior that a human being wouldn't interact with. And then there's that second level question is, why do I think TikTok doesn't care? It's because, comments lead engagement. So it's good for their ad platform to have these fake accounts on there. More people commenting, making people angry, more time on the app. More time on the app equals more inventory for the advertisers. So they all win, except for, the users.
On that front, and we'll definitely shout out again, like the paper that you led in terms of that we got published, but you may want to break down a little bit in terms of like why the focus on the comments, to help people out in terms of really understanding how a lot of the influence kind of games, reindeer games are happening on TikTok.
Yeah, yeah. To quote Yo Gotti, it goes down in the DMs. But no, it's all the action happens in the comments, right? So people observe things. They watch the video on YouTube, they watch it on TikTok, and then the social proof, that the weirdest human element of what we do is, and you see this sometimes, the way I race to the comments, right? You'll see people engage because they want to know, am I seeing the same thing everyone else is seeing? Is everyone else having the same experience I am? There's an experiential piece to it. And if you can have the top comment or a comment that is remonstrative or incendiary, it drives engagement. And you'll see this many times across social media. The number one most engaged comment is ignorant, stupid, meant to be subversive, meant to make people angry. Because if you just have the most lukewarm take about something, like, you know, you watch a music video and you're like, this band's pretty cool, I guess. No one's making a living on, I liked it all right, right? You have to say something crazy, you know, like it's a country music video. I bet this guy bangs his sister. 10,000 replies, right? Like that's the thing that's going to move the needle. And so I think the GRU and other state and non-state actors understand that if you want a video to get a lot of views, you can seed it with incendiary comments, and then people will respond, especially on TikTok, because you see when your comment gets responded to, and you're going to go back and reply again, and then there's going to be another reply, and you're in an argument, right? Now, why do I like to argue? I don't know. Why did I get married? I love arguing, right? So like, it's the same thing. I don't know if that's
GRU is the,
but it's like it's the human nature, right? I need a disagreement to move the football forward, and so that's probably why so much of the engagement farming works the way it does with the GRU.
Oh, that's the Russian agency.
Yeah, the GRU is the Russian quasi CIA DoD mix. It's like the CIA remix, you know, like they do it their own way. They blend the two.
Exactly. How much do you think, again, like when real fame and that attention for folks really start get going after folks, how do you think it changes folks, or is it just like different ways, or in some ways even before they're famous, where they kind of like that? You make it sound like, again, even before fame, Travis was kind of like that.
Yeah, you have to be crazy to want it. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah,
and of course, you know, he's kind of known for his, you know, behavior today, right? There's a couple different ways to go about it. I think the best way to become famous is extremely slowly and gradually, so you can grow into it. The people who end up like overnight famous and just have like the one-hit wonder and don't understand how to handle it, those are the ones who crack the fastest. And Dave Chappelle famously said it, you know, one time about Mariah Carey. He's like, oh, people said Mariah Carey's crazy. People said I was crazy because I went off to Africa and left all the money. Fame is a weird thing. And I've been with people that I've worked with who are relatively famous in public settings, just like eating lunch at a restaurant in Echo Park on a patio, and people come up and bother them. You don't have even like a private life in public. It's hard for you to engage in public spaces beyond a certain level of fame. And it makes you want to become a recluse. And this happened to a really close friend of mine, where he was in one of the biggest, you know, pop bands in the world, and then leaves the biggest pop band because he hated being famous. It was just something that was viscerally against every part of his being, to always have to be on, and then to see yourself written about all the time. I have a good friend who's currently, actually, no, he's not. I think he retired last year, but he was an NBA basketball player, right? Not like super famous, but, you know, not even a starting guy, 6th man, 7th guy off the bench, but every once in a while he'd get in a game, play 15 minutes, something like that. Even that guy, it's weird to have your entire life written about and critiqued and talked about by other people. And when you don't do well at your job, people are critiquing you and saying you're terrible. It erodes your psyche to have your job and everything you do be publicly judged, because we ain't built that way. You know, that's why even for me, like having a quote unquote small presence on social media, I think the reason that I'm able to be more resilient against the criticism is because I was able to see other people do it. I've seen it happen over time. And so you can say anything about me you want on social media. I'm so used to it. I've been canceled more times than I can count. I'm uncancelable. Right? Because you can't make me go away. I'm like a really persistent STD. I'm going to keep on being here, you know, and I know it. whether or not you're aware of it, I'm going to keep on being around. So, you know, worst case scenario is I pop back up in 5 years and
The analogy's still working.
Yeah.
It's still working. The analogy still works.
Yeah.
It still burns.
Yeah. Shane
It's
Morris,
shout out
it
to-
still burns. That's my slogan now.
Shout out to Cancel Me, which is our closing song produced by Amin.
Oh, nice.
So it's very, very on theme. What I want to ask you, how do you, what would be your advice, I guess, for people developing that kind of resiliency, even if they're just scared of one person rejecting them, but just, you know, if they are getting a lot of attention for doing something well and they're struggling to manage, you know, their feelings about it and the attention mostly.
Yeah, you got to get used to rejection. Rejection is normal, especially when you're working in music. I think for me, like being attuned to rejection was, you know, dating when I was in Nashville, right? You're in a Republican dating pool and you're a white dude with a gold grill. It's not going to work out for you, right? Like I was used to women saying no to me. Like if you're in Nashville and you look like me, you're just like that novelty guy that like you bring home to your parents because the black guy you brought home didn't piss them off enough, right? Like, sorry, Sean,
No,
but like, you know, like it's just like I was so used to being rejected that it was normal to me. And so you have to be in an environment, or you like that one, yeah. You know, you have to be in an environment where it's normal to understand that most people don't want something new. No one wants to be the first person to take a risk and say, I like this band, because socially there's this pressure to like what is already available. And it's cool to like something that other people already like because there's zero social friction there. Yeah. And so like, I always try and explain to people, don't try and sell your music day one. That's actually the worst way to do it. The artists that I worked with that were successful, I was like, just get people to go out to your show. Don't even mention like, hey, look, I'm playing a show. Don't even worry about listening to my music. Just come on out. I want you guys to hang with me, and tell them to bring their friends, because they are more interested in hanging out with their friends than they are listening to your music. Trust it. They're not going to care day one, because them getting your friends to listen to music is this conversation. Hey guys, why don't you listen to my friend's band? No. All right, cool. See you later. You know, like that conversation never works out for anybody. But what you can do is say, hey, I'm going out to this concert and let's just get wasted. Right? That's a much easier conversation to have, because people socially, like, I don't care about the band, whatever. Make sure that that's your sales point. And if they happen to like the band when they're there and you're cool enough as a person, they'll be fine. Because the people that I met that ended up being successful are usually a combination of really, I mean, super talented top line songwriters. And then they're also just kind of cool people that people want to be around and hang with after the show and get to know them. And I think you see that a lot, especially when you see the interviews on late night TV with your Conans and your Jimmy Kimmels or whatever. If you see the bands where the lead singer, or at least one of the guitar players, is a somewhat magnetic personality, you can fake that on stage. You can be a good stage performer and terrible in person. But I think that the people who are clever and funny and genuinely build good relationships do well. The best example of this, and I'll name drop, Jordan and Jason from the band Cherub out in Nashville. They're like Nashville legends, Cherub. And it's because they know everybody. And yes, they had a hit song. This was back in, when did Doses come out? 2010, 2011, Doses and Mimosas. Doses and Mimosas, great track. The bigger thing for them though, is that they always had a party everywhere they were going. Hey, we're going out, Jordan and Jason. They wouldn't even tell you to go to their show. Like, just come hang out with us. Come hang out at the house. Come hang out at the bar with us, whatever. And they end up buying a bar, and then we just have people out for drinks with them. So they understood that there was a social dynamic. And so musicians, I think, forget that, yes, you're selling this like music commodity, but you're also selling an experience, and the experience is something that you are and you're part of. And if people don't like you and they think you're lame, they're definitely not going to listen to your music. Like, being cool is this very amorphous target. Like, how do people, there's no such thing as like how to be cool. And not to like credit myself too much, but I think a lot of the bands that I worked with, many of them piggybacked on the fact that, like, when I lived in East Nashville, I was the king of East Nashville. Everyone knew me. And it was because I was committed to destroying my liver, right? I would be out every night, all the time. I never, thank God I, didn't have kids at that time, but I would just be Wednesday night. Where am I? Anywhere I want to be. I don't have children, no responsibilities. I'm going to be out. And so I think that was part of it. You just have to be like super social all the time, involved in nightlife, know every promoter. And if you do all those things, you might make it. Yeah.
Right.
everything that we see that's in like the nation state kind of politics, kind of like information space in terms of different tactics people use around information, it's all been done in the entertainment space first. What do you think is the best way in terms of when we're thinking about like countering messaging, countering and like and almost playing defense? I kind of wanted to hear your thinking on that.
No, I can speak on that. And I've been thinking about it a lot recently. Yeah. So, what's it, Blake Lively and that other guy, Justin something?
I know of it. Yeah, I said, yeah.
The dude.
Yeah. So Candace Owens, our resident internet wackadoodle, recently started doing a series on the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni thing. I don't really know the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni background, but I think there are people who peddle misinformation and political messaging who understand that it's more important to be entertaining than it is to be truthful. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss. I, as a TikToker, am not trying to make the content that is absolutely the most truthful. I'm trying to make entertainment. And if I happen to tell the truth in doing so, that's fine. But I'm not a journalist. That's not what I do here. So if you're trying to hold me to the standard of the New York Times, the Washington Post, I think that that's kind of missing the point. The people who are the creators and podcasters, we are a way for people to receive entertainment. No one who's listening to this podcast, who might hear it on, Spotify or find it on LinkedIn, is coming here because they're like, well, Shane is a very serious journalist and he is getting all his sources correct and his facts right. Now, I'm the opposite of that. I exist as this like all singing, all dancing. I'll give you, actually, this is let's get philosophical. I love doing this.
Please.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this book called Trickster Makes This World by Lewis Hyde. And the idea is, in Greek mythology, it was the tricksters, these mythological characters that were pushing the edge of what we thought was socially acceptable or meaningful forward. So in Native American culture, you've got like the coyote, and the coyote was wise, but also clever and would teach people lessons. So I exist and understand this. I know that if I would like to push truth or stories, the reason folk tales exist is because we wanted to teach people things, but teaching people things in pragmatic ways doesn't work. So you have to construct these elaborate folk tales and stories to tell people the boy who cried wolf isn't believed because he lied too many times or whatever, or the cleverness of the fox or the wise coyote or the owl or whatever it is. You have to use stories to teach people. And so I'm not comparing people like Joe Rogan to the wise, sages who are coming up with these tales. But what I am saying is that he gives people a narrative that often mirrors these folk tales. And so what we have to get comfortable doing is constructing what are modern folk tales. And what that means is you have to be okay with kind of lying to people in order to get them where you want them, because our adversaries have absolutely no problem lying whatsoever. They manufacture lies because it's convenient for them. And I think a lot of us have a visceral reaction to be like, all right, I'm going to make something up. And because I need to get a means to an end. I need to perpetuate something that isn't real because I'm trying to accomplish something. And I remember, in 2019, right? I went super viral on Twitter because I wrote this movie script, right? And I was like, I'm going to lie and say this is a true story because I know I can manipulate the media into believing it. And why would I do that? Because I'm trying to make money, right? And if you're good at the internet and you don't mind telling the truth, like telling a lie, knowing that no one gets hurt, and it is just something that is a mechanism to get paid, like, do I mind that people bring this up every now and then? Kind of not really. Do you know why I don't mind? Because I made money. I bought a 7 series, right? So you can penalize me and say, Shane made up this convoluted story. And I can be like, yeah, but I got it optioned. So who won here? Me? Yeah, kinda, like, so sorry, but not sorry. The internet runs on lies. And if you're one of these people who's beholden to the truth at all times, that's great. Congratulations on graduating J school or becoming a highly ethical lawyer. But I don't work that way. Right, dude, I remember this. I have over 150 videos where I hold up a bottle of Heinz Buffer Ranch and pretend I'm sponsored by Heinz. They've sent me cease and desist letters because they really don't want me mentioning their brand. You know, like,
It's all over LinkedIn for everybody out there.
Yeah. And my banner on LinkedIn. Like, you think I care? No, of course not. So to get it back to Sean's point, we as a nation state apparatus of misinformation, counter misinformation, you got to be okay lying about Putin. The truth hurts him enough. But like, why wouldn't you lie? He's lying about you. It's like having a jilted ex, right? If she's lying about you, lie right back. You know, like don't be above the fray. All is fair in love and war, right?
Wisdom of the
What
ages.
happened? Oh, she cheated on me. Nuh-uh, she has chlamydia. Who's going to prove you otherwise, right? Make it up. It doesn't matter. Slut shaming is great. No, he didn't say that. Damn it. He did thing. There's educated people who are going to cancel you now. Damn it.
Oh my God. So yeah, long story short,
Good
being
hook
entertaining,
meets
being entertaining
good
and
story.
funny is more important than telling the truth.
Tell a better story.
Absolutely. On the internet, at least.
Yeah.
I'm not, this isn't marriage advice, by the way.
So, okay. So you're gonna soon get back into doing a lot of creative things in music. And if you were hired by a state actor to build a famous face from scratch for political purposes, how would you then do it?
Good question.
Knowing what you just told us.
Oh, the easy question. So I think that the best people for misinformation are people who already exist that you just accelerate their content. This is why I think that it was such a stroke of genius that Tenet Media was behind Tim Pool and whatever those usual chuds, right? If you already have the built-in audience and you think that they have momentum, just fuel it. Like the idea that you need to add, like grassroots somebody from the ground up is craziness. Find somebody who's convenient for your message and then guide them a certain way. They're already doing it on their own. And it's I hate to say it's the record label model, right? But record labels are a hedge risk portfolio, right? So it's not like I'm trying to create one face. Record labels invest in, say, 100 different artists a year, $100,000 advances, and of those, 5 will make money, right? But of those 5 that make money, they make a lot of money. And so I think if I'm the GRU, and I think they already do this anyway, I think that they don't really know what's going to work. I think that they're just looking at like a hedge portfolio and they say, we're going to make investments in a lot of these crazy conspiracy wackadoodles, and whichever ones organically rise to the top, well, then we'll let them be famous. But I think that's how it works, realistically. I think what happens is there's some people who do better at cultivating their audiences, and they're better on Discord, and they've built themselves a small community. And if you take somebody who's already got 5,000 people on their Discord and 20,000 followers on TikTok, and you start accelerating their messaging, right? Yeah. Now you've got a couple of mechanisms behind the scenes. You're improving their comments a little bit. Yeah. You're maybe, interacting a little bit more. You've got some farming methods that are probably behind the scenes that I've got some suspicions about, but they've got ways to accelerate these people's message. So now they're not getting 20,000 views on a video. They're getting 50. Now they're getting 100. Now they're picking up a little bit more. And then the more times you have 100,000 views on a video, the more often it'll perform better. And then TikTok now algorithmically wants to show it more because they're getting more interaction. And I have my suspicions there's people right now that I've seen, and a guy tried to cancel me last week. He's an interesting character. But anyway, he tried to cancel me in a video, and I was like, I actually see the same bots in your account that I used to see. But that's cool, So you see the same bots over and over, and you're like, I think you're being boosted. I mean, that's the other thing too. This is the clever part of it. I know when to not interact. And so I think sometimes too, this is one of those weird, it's the fact checking, right? The problem with fact checking is that the moment you perform the fact check, you are now kind of even giving validity to the original message because you're quasi boosting it. Like all these fact checking sites, all they do is actually create another vector for somebody to find that information, because there's an entire the rabbit holes I've gone down on TikTok, sometimes mind-numbing, but there's entire rabbit holes of people like, you can't believe the fact-checking sites, they're the ones who are trying to, because they're funded by George Soros. And I'm like, please stop talking about George Soros. I just need that check to clear, you know? Like, I've got 3 kids, all right, please. You know, that check has never bounced.
What's your advice to everyday people who are just going insane and getting sucked in? And, you know, if there is advice, to, like, how do we help? You know, part of the premise of Mad Warfare is how do we give people tools and information, stories that make us a stronger and, call me Pollyanna, but more united nation. And we're falling into all of this war with each other over disinformation and just shitty stories that are catching all the attention. But what can we do when we're online getting riled up and caught up in this?
Yeah, I think understand the ecosystem first and foremost is designed to sell ads. Everything that we consume, everywhere you go, is designed for clickbait, right? The more remonstrative the headline, the crazier the video, the more outspoken the host is, the more likely it is that you're going to see that, because it's a contest for the highest volume. Who's going to say the craziest thing? And you have to keep pushing that mold. And so the way that you understand it is when I go on the internet, there's like actually, I'm going to describe this as 2 internets, right? There are 2 internets that we engage with. You have your active internet, and you have your passive internet. Your active internet is pretty easy to understand. This is, I need a thing. I'm going on Amazon or wherever it is because I'm trying to find a specific thing. I need, a new shower head because I have a leaky shower head. That is not a good time to capture my information, right? Like I'm not thinking, the only thing I'm thinking about is I have a leaky shower head and I need to solve this problem. And I might look at some review videos on YouTube to try and determine which shower head is going to be both good for my shower and also for my wife's extracurriculars. Which massaging shower head is the best? And then there's passive internet, right? Passive internet is when you wander, and it is like an activity that we don't engage in the real world. There's no real world analog for wandering. Some people call it doom scrolling or whatever it is, but this is the most dangerous part of the internet for people to engage in, because you would not just go start walking around your neighbor's house and your yard, just hopping over fences and just kind of seeing what's out there. Like this type of activity does not exist. There's no such thing as parkour for lazy people, right? But that's really what wandering on the internet is. You are just kind of finding out what's next. I don't know what's going to happen when I hit scroll next on, what's it Reels on Instagram? That's that little Timo version of TikTok they're pushing anyway. But I don't know what I'm going to hit next. Remember that the passive internet is the most mind-numbing part of your existence, because it is only designed to keep you trapped in there. And they hire, true story, the people who gamify this system, the algorithm engineers, the people who do the likes, the responses, the comments, the games, the notifications, those people get hired from gambling companies, gaming companies. Gotcha. The same people designing slot machines to be more addictive and keep you at them, the noises, the sounds, all that. Those are the same people running social media companies, because they need you to stay on this. And it pains me to say this because I need you to stay on the app because I get paid money from TikTok. But no, you need to spend less time looking at screens, because the screens are designed to make you feel polarized. They're designed to make you feel extremely engaged in one direction politically, because the more engaged you are, the more ads you see. These are the engines you're competing with. So, like, I hate to be Mr. Responsible Parent over here, but set yourself some screen time. Don't, always be consuming the same type of stuff. And if you feel, right, like, hey, I just need to take a break. Like, there's nothing you're going to find next in that next scroll, right, that's going to change your life. There's no breaking news story that's like, your life is just not that interesting. Most of us have the same damn cars, the same mortgages, the same ugly kids doing the same stupid stuff, right? Like, trust it, it'll be fine. You can get off the internet for a hot minute, go play some Spider-Man 2, like you'll be fine. Spider-Man 2 is a sick game, by the way. I bought that for my child, but awesome. Anyway, just get off the internet. The internet's not making you feel better. It's just trust it.
Go outside.
Yeah, go outside, touch some grass, smoke it if you're allowed to, and you don't have a government job.
Oh my gosh! Any parting words for us as Mad Warfare?
Yeah, I think that people on the Hill need to understand that politics, as you got it, like policy, ideas, how we think about the media, how we think about governance, this has become a show sport. And it's something that politics used to be showbiz for ugly people, if that makes sense. Like if you couldn't make it in LA acting, you would, get into politics. Look at Reagan, right? But he did it back when you could still kind of be sort of ugly, but Reagan was ugly as hell, right? And so the reason he had to quit acting is he was a good actor. He was just ugly. And so now people get into politics because they like the money and the power, but they also realize that it's a vector towards fame. Like I used to think that, like the music business was just a fame vector. But really, the concept of misinformation, the concept of cognitive warfare and information warfare is just the vector of policy, right? In politics, that's what governments are supposed to do. So rather than writing a song, you got to have the best narrative, right? Mm-hmm. And politicians have always had narratives. They've always had a story they're trying to tell. And the most successful politicians, they're like songwriters. It's made the best story win. If you want to have the top, the top song on the Billboard chart, it's not the top song on the Billboard chart. It's the top story that the most people want to engage with. The people who have the most compelling narrative are the people who ultimately win here. And the downside is, to make this kind of thing come full circle, right? It's kind of like when Lil Nas X decided to put out a quote unquote country song, Old Town Road, and all the people in country music freaked out because like, this isn't a country song. And then they're like, but also we're not going to say the N word, but it's not a country song. And then, he's making kind of hip hop country music, and it's the same thing. Like Russia realized that they could get to the top of the country charts, right? They're like, hey, you know what? We've got the best narrative, and the most people are going to like our style of American music, And so they've done this. They've got the best narratives. Like Russia, you can hate them for a myriad of reasons, which we should. But the thing is, their narratives are way better than ours. Mm-hmm. Their screenwriters have more creativity. They know how to like pander to the American audience. They give us the things that we can't even give ourselves. Like, so that's what politicians need to understand is you got to have a better song, man. You got to hire, if you ain't a good songwriter, hire a songwriter. Pop stars do it all the time. They're not making their own music. No. Shit, no.
Well said.
That's why we need people like Sean and Jocelyn. We need people to come in like, listen, we care about poor people bit, not working. Okay. We're going to have to do something a little better. Like feed the children. No one cares about those stupid kids. Let's give them fucking action figures. All right. Let's give the people, what do you want? Nobody wants to feed the kids. You know what I'm doing? I'm done with this podcast. I ordered a foot massager on TikTok. I don't care about my kids. I'm going to give myself a foot massage. All right. Give the people what they want. Foot massagers, not education. Is that my final message?
Thank you for coming. Like I really like Shane. It means the world. Thank you for again. And these insights, I think everybody in the audience is gonna end up really enjoying it. So yeah,
I maybe we'll see.
Appreciate you, Shane.
Later, guys.
All right, take care.
I've come to talk with you again. Come and be inside my head. Cancel me, cancel me. I got things to say, you can cancel me. Cancel me, cancel me. I got things to say, you can cancel me. Cancel me, cancel me. I got things to say, you can cancel me. It's only a matter of time till we all win. Cancel the mistake. It's only a matter of time till we all win. Cancel the mistake. It's only a matter of time till we all win. Cancel the mistake. Cancel me. Cancel me. Cancel me. I got things to say. You can cancel me. Cancel me. Cancel me. I got things to say. You can cancel me. Cancel me. Cancel me. I got things to say. You can cancel me.